I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Today on The Truth About Addiction, I'm joined by someone whose story is remarkable as it is inspiring. All the way from the United States, Benjamin Lerner.
Thank you so much for having me.
3 years ago, we did this podcast, and I was new to podcasts, and you were doing your own thing, and you were into your music and everything else. For the people that don't know who you are, Benjamin, you grew up in one of America's most legendary musical families, you know? Your great-grandfather was Irving Berlin, the composer behind the iconic songs like God Bless America and White Christmas. By the age of 14, Benjamin was a classical piano prodigy, performing full concerts. Today, he's a rapper, composer, recovery advocate, viral content creator with over 500,000 followers and more than 5 million video views. He uses his unique piano rap style to share his story with millions of people fighting their own battles of addiction. Welcome to the show, and for the listeners, you've got something really special here, guys. This is a really good human being, you know. I'm blessed to have you on our show, Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I told a lot of my story last time, but I think I'll give like a little bit of an overview for people who are not familiar with my platform. And there's a lot of great content creators in Australia. You got more than enough down under to keep you satisfied with you, with Danny Shannon, TikTok Gary. Like, there's a lot of great people doing good recovery advocacy work down there, separate from just your recovery coach working on the front lines. But, you know, I always like to say I was an alcoholic and addict before my first drink. I was looking for something external to fix something internal. Validation was my first drug of choice. I remember always feeling uncomfortable in my skin before I was diagnosed with autism spectrum. I was hiding under tables, screaming with my hands over my ears. And that's a perfect analogy because I was both trying to block stuff out and crying out for help long before the needle ever hit my vein. And my parents were good people. They were both Ivy League educated journalists. Like you mentioned, my great-grandfather's an Oscar-winning composer, Irving Berlin. But I like to say addiction doesn't discriminate, and neither does recovery. I was born not into a billionaire family, but I went to private school. I went to school with senators and Congress people's kids and the owners of baseball teams. That didn't change the fact that I always had this inborn feeling of not being good enough to deserve basic human happiness. And it wasn't my parents. I mean, no parents are perfect, but my parents were kind people. But when they got divorced, my mom took up with a man, her rebound man, who was a wonderful person in a lot of ways when he wasn't drinking. But my first real exposure to alcohol, other than people having polite sips who weren't alcoholics at dinner parties and family holiday events, was this guy that when he relapsed, I didn't know he was an alcoholic, but he was 2 years sober. And then he relapsed and he had a big argument with my mom. And I remember smelling the gin on the counter and, you know, the smell of cigarettes in the air and comforting my mom after. And not long after that, my mom, who is just the sweetest woman in the world, but very sensitive. She had been an alcoholic her whole life. She just didn't have a reason to drink. And then she found a reason to drink with this guy and it took off. And at the same time, her alcoholism began to accelerate. I had my first drink in my friend's basement in 7th or 8th grade. And I remember feeling the sensation like when you touch back down after a long flight and your eardrums pop, you just feel a relief of pressure. I got the sensation from drinking a 6-pack of disgusting, forgotten, musty beer in his parents' basement that they had forgotten. But it came at the price of the fact that nothing else in my life mattered because I was chasing that thing I thought was the solution, which was really destroying my will to seek out anything natural like friendship, like spirituality, like my passions for writing and for playing music. And my addiction escalated. It was pretty suburban, but the problem was that even though I went to this, you know, white-collar private school, it wasn't just that I was using alcohol, cannabis, other party drugs in the beginning of my addiction to sate my self-centered fear and my internal discomfort. It was that the drugs themselves became my identity. And on many podcasts and in our past podcast, you told me about how crime became your identity. What became my identity for me is the same way the aging businessmen would twirl their BMW and Bentley keys around the school parking lot, or they would show off their big mansion in the suburbs as a material extension of their worth to compensate for their insecurities. I didn't think I was good enough to walk in the party, but if I had a handle of Hennessy and some good weed, then it didn't matter that I was the lanky, weird kid. My identity was the bottle in the bag. So it wasn't just that I was sating my insecurities with the chemical. It was that it became my identity. And so what ended up happening is I went to college, I dropped out, and I started stealing money from my family like I never had before. And I was making hip hop music glorifying my addiction after dropping out of classical piano conservatory. And all the songs that I made were completely fake. I had a real passion for music, but I was more passionate about trying to convince people that I was this Scarface figure when really I was just army crawling to get my mom's checks for my college account that I was privileged to have by my, upper class family. And I ended up cashing these checks fraudulently, taking $100,000 out of her account and I ended up, after blowing through that money, driving around from school to school, all of my friends going to college to be lawyers and doctors and all these things, taking advantage of the gifts they were given. I literally put it up my nose and put it in my mouth with the bottle. And about a year into that, I crashed into 3 other cars on the way back from this party in Philadelphia where I was visiting some of my friends with the last of the money from my account that I had drained. And when I slammed my car into 3 other cars, my first thought wasn't, oh my gosh, is anybody else okay? Oh my gosh, like my mom's car is totaled. Like I'm going to jail. My first thought was, yeah, if I go to jail, I'm not going to be able to drink or use today. That's the only thing that mattered to me. And I did what a lot of people in old school recovery call a geographic. I relocated to a cheaper school. My family wanted to help me and they wanted to make sure that I didn't get derailed. So they sent me to this program in San Francisco across the country. And I actually, for about a month, was doing good. I wasn't sober, but I was going to class. I had stopped drinking. I was managing consequences and I was having a great time. But 4 wisdom teeth came in impacted, meaning they needed to be removed because they were encroaching on my jaw. And it wasn't just that they needed to be extracted, they were infected and I needed to have minor jaw reconstruction surgery to compensate for the hole that would be left. So I was out for like 5 or 6 hours and they were doing major dental surgery. And when I woke up, they told me that I couldn't smoke, which was what I had used, smoke cannabis. I couldn't smoke cigarettes. I couldn't even drink a soda out of a straw because the suction would take the clots out of my mouth. And then what happened is they gave me 100 Percocets instead. And so it took me a couple years from that initial aha moment with the beer in the basement to the point that I was a chemically dependent and spiritually dependent alcoholic. It took me a couple weeks with those pills escalating to perk 30s, escalating to Dilaudids and oxymorphone, and then dope. And when I first did heroin, I was actually living the life that I used to fake rap about, but it wasn't as cinematic as I thought. It wasn't as cool to be riding up with a ex-con dude with a pistol in the glove box, bumping all this old school rap that he was actually living, snorting heroin off of a rusty penny on the way back from the Baltimore like trap houses. And I went to treatment for the first time. And by that time, my mom had gotten sober, but she didn't know how to help me because my heroin and Oxycontin addiction was nothing like her white wine and Xanax addiction. We were the same spiritually, but she didn't know how to reach me and I didn't want to be reached. So the next 4 years were a completely tragic blur. Every single drug-a-log cliche you can think of from a suburban, like, you know, long-haired addict. I mean, it really went from suburban parties where I was snorting oxy in the basement within the scope of 3 years, in and out of outpatient treatment several times, just doing it to get my family off of my back. And at the end, in June of 2016, well, really May, because that's when I flew back from San Francisco, my day consisted of waking up, shooting black tar, smoking crack, picking cigarettes out of the gutter, and like stale muffins out of the trash of the kitchen in the apartment building that I was at because I spent every last cent. I couldn't even buy food because I was that intent on spending every single cent that I had. I was stealing money, not just out of my mom's purse, but my friends' wallets when they weren't looking. I had abscesses that I was afraid to go to the hospital for because it would show on my mom's insurance. So I was lancing abscesses with blunt needles. And I still thought that my use was justified because I thought it would be more painful to lance an infected abscess or go through a seizure by myself than to get sober. And so when I was finally ready to get sober, I didn't do it because I had a white light moment. I didn't do it because my friends died or my dad saw me have one of those aforementioned seizures at the bottom of the hospital bed, crying and begging me to get sober. My mom begging me to get sober. My friends saying that I smelled like I hadn't showered in months and that I hadn't brushed my teeth in days, because they were right. I hadn't. The only thing I cared about was my next bundle and my next bag of hard white. And I got sober because the drug stopped working. I was up at this motel in Jersey, me and my friend who's also in recovery. I just saw him for the first time in 10 years. We didn't see each other for 10 years after we were using because we were so tight in the game. But when I drove out to Arkansas to do a recovery revival event in a Wrightsville prison out there, I saw him on the way in Nashville, and it happened serendipitously. But he was one of the last dudes I got high with, and we copped bundles of potent fentanyl-laced dope in New York. We had all the coke we wanted too. And, you know, I took a big blast of crack. I hit my vein with 3 bags, and I didn't get high. I got physically high, but I didn't get emotionally or spiritually high. And that was scarier to me than my friends dying, than being arrested, than being held at gunpoint, than any of the things that happened. Because for the first time in my life since I had drank that beer in the basement, my chemical solution wasn't a spiritual solution anymore. And at that point, I knew that I had to do something. I could either check out and end it, but I had tried that. I had tried banging cap after cap after cap after bag to the point I couldn't even see the blood register in the rig. Nothing worked that way. And I could try to like accelerate my use, but at that point when you're IVing fentanyl, you know, there's not much more you can do. So that was not an option. And then the third option was actually asking for help. So I called the treatment center with a needle in my arm, but I still called them. And I went there and I almost left halfway through because of a botched rehab romance where I acted selfish and I transferred my addiction to fentanyl, crack, and heroin and alcohol back onto my original addiction, which was validation. And I wanted to leave. I had my bag packed and I decided to stay because I thought even if I'm not worth saving for all the lies and stealing and manipulation and deceit, maybe that same scared little kid that at the beginning of the story, under the table with his hands over his ears screaming out, is worth saving. And what I found on the other side by working my chosen path of group-based abstinence recovery is I found that when people used to tell me in the rehabs when I wasn't ready to be a service and to like practice what the principles of the program that they were trying to teach me was, I thought it was like some corny, like hitch up your pants and like walk in the light and just do it because it's a thing to do. And it was like, no, I chose to be a service in the cafeteria at the rehab to get out of my own head. It was a selfish reason. Like you talked to when we were talking earlier for my radio thing about you did it to save yourself, helping men in jail. You found your purpose not because it was the right thing to do, but because it was the right thing for you in the moment. And that transferred to when I got out of treatment and I was in the recovery house and I applied for my first job. And that job was a very taxing and a very arduous and a very low-level job. It was being a busboy. And I literally had to clean the plates and clean up the tables of the same parents of the kids who used to go with me to high school, the life I didn't have. And there was this beautiful moment, though, where one of the kids who I would like go around the country to party with, who had gone on to be this high-powered young junior lawyer. I was 24 and he was like 23 already, like, get in this law firm. And he pulls up in his BMW at this supermarket where I'm with my mom after I move out of the recovery house because my job can't work with my curfew. And he looks at me and he says, "Skinny?" And I'm in my busboy apron. Skinny's my nickname. And I think he's about to rip on me or something like that. So I'm looking down all ashamed. He's like, "Bro, you look good. I heard you got sober. That's amazing." And everything instantly rewired after that moment because I no longer saw the drugs as a material extension of my worth. I saw recovery as a spiritual extension of my worth. Because everything I had tried to achieve with dressing the same way as the kids I went to school with, bringing the substances into the party, trying to prove my worth through anything but my actual resilience and growth, didn't take me to a place where I felt comfortable in my own skin. So that's when I really put my nose to the grindstone, started reaching out, asking for help on a spiritual and a personal level, put everything that I had into my chosen path of recovery and working with other guys. And the one thing that I hadn't done is I had put my music to the side because music was something that I thought I would always do. I was writing songs, I was doing it, but I was smart enough to know, and I forewent an opportunity when a clique of musicians signed a deal with Sony Records up in Brooklyn, and they weren't addicts like me, but they weren't sober. They drank and they smoked, and I knew that although I wanted to go up with them and they offered it to me with this development deal, that I wouldn't be able to do that if I was using anything. So I let that go, and I focused on my life. I got a job as a waiter and then, funnily enough, a bartender while simultaneously being a peer counselor, and I was happy. And my father gave me the keys to a house he built with his bare hands in this American state called Vermont, which is this beautiful, lots of trees, mountains, cows. It's a very rural, beautiful part of the country. And he gave me the keys, and I was going up to fix up that house in the middle of the woods, and I met a friend that I hadn't seen in years, and he introduced me to the guy who owns this studio. And it didn't happen because I wanted to chase clout and wanted to be a musician or content creator or anything. It happened because I regained my father's trust, and he gave me the metaphoric and literal keys to a new way of life that I unlocked through my recovery. And ever since then, since I moved up in 2018, I've partnered with a man named Dr. Joshua Sherman to share a message of hope and recovery through lived experience content and music. And I've become a father, which is more important than any of that, to my 3 beautiful boys, Jude, Max, and Wilson, who was born 14 days ago. I'm a man of Christ. Jesus Christ is my chosen path of faith, but just like I respect all paths of recovery, abstinence, Matt, Cali sober, the harm reduction movement, although I'm still trying to learn and understand more about that. And, we're all learning one day at a time, regardless of the path. I respect all paths of faith. If you're atheist, Muslim, Jew, whatever, I'm not trying to tell you my path is right, just like recovery, but I found God's grace through working my program and praying and through being close with my family. And through the grace of God and the clarity provided me in recovery, I reached a point that I was ready to really share my story. And I was 6 months, it was like early recovery all over again when I had my first son. And I was working as a journalist, which again, never thought I would do that when I'm digging cigarettes out of the gutter. No college degree, just the same guy owning the studio who also owns some cultural publications, giving me a chance. And all of a sudden I'm writing for all these magazines. I got a kid, I got a car, I got a beautiful girl in the house with me raising this boy, and I see a little reel come across my screen. I don't even know what reels are. I'm dropping music, I'm speaking at schools, I'm releasing music in an old school way, but I don't know about social media. And then I see creators that are on all paths of recovery talking about it. And I pick up a phone and I start talking. Same way I picked up a phone to call the treatment center and told them my truth. I just started speaking the truth to the camera. And because of that, and because of the same perseverance applied to my path to recovery, because if I wasn't sober, obviously there's no way that I could be a content creator, because I would always be like going out and like copping bags and doing what I had to do to get that, screwing over my family and everyone else. But separate from the chemical sobriety, if I wasn't working a program of recovery, I would not be able to find the consistency that I need to do the work that I do now as a creator, as a musician, as someone who helps with social media development for other organizations. And it all ties together. God, recovery, family, and the values instilled in me by men who knew a lot more than I did and knew enough to know that they had to help me so I could potentially help others, but really help myself. And it's only by God's grace and the grace of Jesus Christ that I'm standing here today, but it's also by the grace of the men who believed in me and served as instruments of God and served as instruments of love, separate from any of that, in the work that they put in. Because a wise man said, faith without works is dead. And with that, I'll close with my little mini share, and let's talk about recovery, life, and anything else, man. God bless you. This means so much to me to be talking to a man of your stature, multiple decades in, across the globe, bro. This is a gift.
Beautiful, man. You know, we have this connection. You talked about the word God, and I've always had trouble with the word God because the way I grew up, and I didn't think that when I first seen the word God, honestly, I didn't think that I passed the God test because I had ignorance around religion and spirituality. And, you know, thou shalt not steal, failed. Thou shalt not commit adultery, failed. You know, I took it like a driver's license test, and I failed the God exam. So I never had a God. And that's why I did what I did for the first 16 years of recovery, well, the first 21 years, really. I'd been in recovery since 1981. That's when I first got sober. And today I have a God. You know, I have a God of my not understanding. And, you know, I went to Jerusalem, went to the Holy Spirit, went to the Holy Wall, the Wailing Wall. I went to the ashrams in India. I searched. You know, I went to Buddhism, read the Bible, read the Quran, because I like to be educated when I make decisions. Because I was ignorant my whole life, and I thought that I was illiterate, and yet I'm a published author. I thought I was illiterate, and I thought I was worthless, useless, and hopeless. I found out actually I'm quite clever. When I did my writing courses, I got 97 and 98s through every module of this course. And I said to the guy that was marking my book, I said, how come I never got 100? He said, would have stopped you from trying. And I was like, that's okay. Facts. Yeah, that's cool.
It's a beautiful way of looking at life and recovery too. It's an ongoing process. Your teacher had wisdom. Shout out to him.
Exactly. And he didn't want to give me too much. He made me earn it. Everything I did, I earned, and it made me strive. And today I do the same in recovery. I strive, you know. In your lowest point, you were using fentanyl, heroin, and crack. Do you believe that you're alive because you had a purpose?
I believe that I am alive because everybody has a chance, and some are luckier than others, that the purpose aligns with their path at a moment that they are willing, whether that's through sobriety or any other form of self-betterment, because not everybody's an addict. But I think that everybody, whether you look at it through an Abrahamic biblical lens of an arc of redemption or a path towards God and absolution and redemption. And that's my personal understanding, but you know, you could talk about it through the Buddhist arc or the Vedic arc or ancient Zoroastrian teachings, Phoenician teachings. It's all about finding purpose and alignment with whether you call it God or the universe. And we can talk about like mystical arts and different paths of mysticism and belief all day. Mine is Christianity. But the reason why I think that I had a purpose is not because I am some star actor in God's plan and that now that I'm sober, God's got my back. God had my back when I was shooting dope. God had my back when I was stealing out of my mom's purse. I just didn't think I was worthy enough to find some true alignment with a plan greater than myself, because I was so insistent on destroying myself and blocking everything out that I also blocked out the good things along with the traumatic things and bad things that I couldn't cope with because I wasn't willing to do the work to get the tools. So it's always bittersweet for me because I've lost more friends than I can count on my fingers and toes. Not like best friends, but some of them were people I used with, people I knew from treatment and recovery. And some of them had real deep connections and not just like using buddies. And because of that, I never want to say they didn't have a purpose. The only thing I say is whether you want to say they were robbed But drugs don't have agency. They're inert substances. And even if you buy in, some people say substances are demonic. I think that they can unlock darkness in people. I think that they can trigger running away from spirituality and light for sure. But separate from the substances, I think that some of us, whether you die of addiction, fentanyl poisoning, alcoholism before your time and before your purpose, that definitely doesn't mean that you didn't deserve to find that purpose or that your life didn't have a purpose, because each one of those people did have a purpose. I just think it's tragic when people who sobriety could work for on any path don't get to live out that purpose. Because every day I battle with survivor's guilt, and I think of all the beautiful and incredible people who had such purpose, such talent, such gifts, and even in active use when they were screwing over their family were beautiful people with moments of kindness and incredible light that they had to share. So I do believe that I am alive for a purpose. But the beautiful thing about recovery, man, is I'm still finding out that purpose every day. And every single day that I'm open to discovering what that purpose and that growth is, rather than thinking I'm so locked in and perfect where I'm at now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree fully. I'm 71 years of age, 40 years clean, been doing this recovery thing since 1977 was my first meeting. But 1981, I got clean and then I relapsed. And in 1981, I said to a lady, I was arrogant and ignorant, 27-year-old boy. I said to an older lady, she come to visit her grandson in rehab. And it was quite rude. When I look back, it was quite rude. I said, what do you do for fun? In a sarcastic sort of way, she's 80-something years of age. And she said, son, as long as I learn something every day, I've had a good day. And it took me about 4 years to understand what she meant. Now I'm the old guy, 71 years of age. I want to learn something every day. I do learn something every day. I learn something about myself. I learn something about humanity. Now, getting clean, I believe, they call it a spiritual awakening. Mine was just a gift. It was something that was just so enormous that I can't explain it to people, that my life is so great that I couldn't dare use, because I love myself more than I hate myself. I don't have the chatter that used to drive me insane. I don't have the fears and anxieties, because tell you a quick story. I did an interview with a really tough human being from New Zealand. He was one of the original members of the Black Power, because in New Zealand it's all gangs. And they're not bikie gangs, they're just gangs. They made gangs to survive. And he turned to Christianity. And he's a lovely guy. I think he'd done 2 murders, 2 life sentences for murder. Beautiful human being. I know people are going to go, how can he be a good human being? He murdered people. That was his past. He don't live there no more. He lives here today. I did a podcast with him, and he said, Ron, after I found God, Jesus Christ, my Saviour and Lord, he said, I was sitting in my home and fear knocked on the door. I asked faith to open it. When he opened the door, he said, there was nothing there. It's because fear and faith can't be in the same room. I love that story. Because he said to me, fear and faith can't be in the same room. And today I have no fear.
That's priceless.
Today I have no fear, man. When they told me I had cancer 2 years ago and to get your affairs in order, I got my affairs in order. I got in contact with my higher power, said, if this is what the story is, blessed, help me organise my family, set up my financial affairs, help my family have security. My spiritual affairs were already in order. I've made amends. I continue to make amends on a daily basis by carrying the message, and that message is, if you feed the good happens. If you feed the bad, bad happens. They're your choices. You're not a victim. None of us are victims. We may be able to justify why we use. We might be able to justify all that stuff. But the reality is, at the end of the day, I was surviving. My use was about surviving in a world that I wasn't equipped to survive in. I didn't have the tools. Today I have the tools, and I have more tools coming.
Right.
I'm excited about recovery. Every day I wake up and I think, wow, what a beautiful day, And I have a guy that I'm coaching at the moment. He's 10 days sober. And I've been watching the light come on for the last 10 days. And he sends me his gratitude list every morning. And his gratitude list is my beautiful children, my beautiful wife, having the chat, And that's, people say to me, why do you still do it? And I said, because of the rewards. I'm an addict. I'm naturally a selfish human being. That's part of my disease, of my addiction. I don't like the word disease. I call it an affliction and an addiction, or whatever you want to call it. But I can turn that into positives. I work my butt off. As I said, my wife just opened a new clothing brand, and it's called Two Wolves. It's related to the disease, the two wolves, the good and the bad, the Cherokee Indian story. Everything we do is community-based, because I believe in giving we receive. I'm connected with a church down the road here who we own the property next door to their property, and we became friends. And whenever they got problems in the church, they ring me. Ron, we've got a lady whose son or his daughter, and they ring me, and it's a blessing that these people they reach out to me and they go, Ron, the mum doesn't know what to do. Can I, will you talk to her? I say, of course I'll talk to her. And I will talk to anybody. I love helping people that want help. And if they're not ready, God bless them. Let's move on. Call me when you're ready. I say to people, you're not ready? God love you. And I pray that you stay alive and come back. Come back. Because my door will always be open. It's said in the Bible, I read the Bible, it said, how many times should I forgive him? And I think it says 1,000 times 1,000. That's the prodigal son. I'm that guy now. In just a few days, on June the 13th, you'll celebrate 10 years.
That's wild, man.
That's crazy.
I can't believe it. Yeah, man. It's humbling. It really is. I mean, my core of my recovery creation, the content I make, is all about one day at a time. And what I mean by that is, I was really inspired when I saw a guy. I was just talking to him today, actually. And he's in early recovery again. He started over. But a couple years ago, he's on a different phase of his recovery. And he started posting about 80 or 90 days in, sobriety count post every day. And it inspired a lot of people to do the same. And it became a trend in recovery content, social media. And I love to see it, but I was like, I got too many days to do that. But then I realized I was limiting myself because I was like, do I really want to live the philosophy of one day at a time? Because if I do, then my 3,000 and change days, which at the time was like 3,300, it's like 36, 49 or 50, whatever 10 years is, like 3 days before. But I posted it and I was like, the difference in day count doesn't matter. I mean, time in recovery gives us gifts, gives us stability, but I have the same day today as the person with 90 days or 9 months or whatever does. And so when I think about 10 years, I think about 10 years of one day at a time. I think about 10 years of waking up every day and deciding that today is the day that I have the agency and freedom, now that the rig's out of my arm and I'm not throwing up in detox anymore, to choose a better life every day. And so the 10-year celebration that I'm doing, which gratefully you participated in, and thank you so much for being a part of it, is we're doing 24 hours straight on a radio station here in America and my primary platform on Facebook, where we're having recovery creators, advocates, politicians, musicians in recovery, musicians and actors and creatives who aren't in recovery, but support recovery. And I don't want to waste a minute of the day. So it's going to be, I believe, 14 hours earlier. I think we were talking about the time difference, but it starts at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, June 13th. I've had some people from Canada, a bunch of people from the US, obviously, but this is so cool having the international recovery community. And it's all a gift of the time I've spent in recovery, because whether it's 10 days or 10 years, I'm just grateful that these days have stacked up into something where I can remember that I've got today, and that's all that matters.
I just looked down, 14,709 days. I just
beautiful, man.
I looked at my recovery date, 14,709 days. I have an app on my phone that tells me I'm sober, and I'm one shot away from being a junkie. Right. I say that to people. I try to say to people, there's no big shots here. We're all one shot away from being a junkie. And when they celebrate a milestone, I say, okay, congratulations today. Tomorrow's just another day. Keep everything really humble. Keep everything really, really humble.
That's what you got to do.
Man, we are blessed, Now, Clean Jam, I really like the name of it. I love the stuff you do, man. How did that come about, the piano rap?
So what happened is I started writing poetry when I was 8. And my mom still has it. It's on, I think, like a shoe store or a CVS, which is like a convenience store here in America, receipt. And the name of the poem was "The Soul is a Bird." And I think I still remember all the words to it. The soul is a seagull flying by the sea. The soul is a bird that hatcheth thee. The little Shakespeare thing. You can't see it, but you better be aware that the soul is the thing and you know it's there. And my parents would read me Shakespeare and Dickinson poems because they were big literature and poetry people, big people of words, both journalists, and that rubbed off on me. And my mom's a singer. There's a lot of musicians in my family. My grandmother was a concert pianist. Her father was a composer, and music is a big part. My cousins all play music. And when I was 14, I married my love of music, classical piano and poetry, with freestyle rapping. And I had always loved hip hop music ever since, just because I love poetry, The culture was cool too. And I have a big respect for the conscious movement hip hop thing and the way that it brought communities together. Hip hop gets a bad rap because a lot of commercial actors lean more into the hedonism and the violent part. But what I like to say about that is, yes, it's not good to glorify violence or destructive cycles, but all music is a product of the environment that it comes from. And just as I have a right as a recovery artist to speak on the path of what works for me, when I look at hip hop music, and I look at the way that communities have been impacted by cycles of similar to what you experienced in Australia, trauma, pain, intergenerational violence, abuse, incarceration, mental health, you see communities that are in need of love and support. And when you look at the origin of hip hop in the Bronx, It was actually made on top of the dance halls that they would have at community rec centers during kind of, if you've ever seen the movie The Warriors, it was in the wake of that, where New York had all these leather jacket gangs and they were beating each other up senseless in the street. And beyond the police that were underfunded in those neighborhoods, the actual heads of the gangs, who also ran the community centers, said, we got to stop this. And the reason is they're like, it's not good for business. So what they did is instead they would have dance-offs, and they would have these things where people would rap over these old breakbeats, and they would say, like, battle through poetry. And so that was how I became a rapper, was in high school when I was drinking and using. That was my way of expressing myself. I was a autism spectrum, lanky, awkward kid who was drunk and high, but that was the only thing that got me higher than the drinking and the using, was channeling poetry and really feeling in my element. But then I made music glorifying. I fell into the same cycle a lot of rappers fall into, which is not just being addicted to substances and like street life, whatever dimension that can take for a suburban, private school kid like me. But I did get addicted to that. But more than that, I got addicted to the clout. I paid to work with famous rappers. I'm not ashamed that I did, but I did it because I wanted their stardom to rub off on me. Because I was addicted to getting views on, early social media sites, YouTube, hot new hip hop, stuff like that. And then when I got sober, I didn't just change my musical approach to do different beats and more low-key, laid-back, less hedonistic music in what that meant to me sonically. I stopped trying to glorify the life that I lived, and I actually got honest about it. I stripped it back, not just in terms of the production, but instead of saying, I just made 10 stacks and I doubled back, I said, no, I actually just smoked a half-smoked cigarette out of the street. And then I went to my mom's purse and stole some money so that I could take the bus to my plug's house, where I wasn't able to hit my vein because the needle was clogged. And so when I made actual music about my actual life, not exaggerating it, not trying to glamorize or glorify it or whatever, but just actually told the truth, that's the point, funnily enough, at which the piano came in. Because I always wanted to combine my piano and the hip hop elements, but they seemed so divergent because those were two sides of my musical and spiritual personality that I couldn't unify in active use. Separate from the music, I couldn't unify that young piano playing kid with the actively addicted person who was robbing his family. And so when I dealt with the underlying trauma and issues, I got to the point that I was no longer ashamed of those two separate sides and how different and divergent they were, and I put them together. And it served as a way for me to evolve not only as an artist, but a person. And as I've leaned more into production and adding drums and getting back to beat-based hip hop, because people heard my piano reels and they were like, this is cool, man, but it's spoken word. Can you do over some beats? And I actually kind of hesitated when I first did that, because my first album in recovery was completely classical piano-based hip hop, which I recorded here at Old Mill Road Recording when Dr. Joshua Sherman, who I've partnered with through this whole campaign, and shout out to Dr. Josh, he believed in me when nobody else did, and he wasn't motivated by money or anything. He, as a physician and a producer, someone who's involved in medicine and music, wanted to partner producer, artist, doctor, recovering addict, and just do something different. But as the social media platform expanded through my talk content and my purely piano-based stuff, it was a real question, do I want to get back to the place where the production kind of mirrors what it was like in active use? And so I made a promise to myself, which is the same thing that I promise I try to make with every single reel that I post or photo that I post, which is it has to abide by 3 basic rules. Would this have helped me in active addiction? Would this have helped me in early recovery to hear? And is it true? And if there's any exaggeration, if there's anything that wouldn't have helped me to hear in active use or early recovery, no matter how good the verse is, or if it's a talk content, piece of content, I don't post it. I have thousands of reels unposted in my phone that looks great. That's nice light, that I got a nice thing that I'm proud of how I said it, but there's a detail and I'm that's not actually what happened. I remembered it wrong. I said it because I was searching for a word and that's not it. And I don't do that because I'm obsessed with whatever. I want this to be something that is therapeutic and honest to myself. And I guess the long and short of it is the piano rap came out of my healing. And it came out of a place of me no longer being ashamed of who I was, but all the musical progress in the world couldn't have done that. It had to come from my recovery and the life I lived outside of the studio.
You've got over 500,000 followers and millions of views on your recovery content. What's one message you'd most want to share with someone who's still struggling with addiction, brother?
The same underlying fear, anger, insecurity, discomfort, pain, sadness, depression, anxiety, whatever, medical diagnosis, whatever psychiatric, psychological diagnosis you've received, no matter how your community has stigmatized you, cast you out, no matter the mistakes you've made, that same pain that's pushing you towards the bottle, the bag, the needle, the spoon, the pipe can push you towards recovery. And if your path to recovery looks different from the people around you, that's okay. If people in the rooms aren't being conducive to you, go somewhere else. If people who aren't in the rooms aren't being conducive to you, go to the rooms or somewhere else that can work for you. If God-based recovery is something that can help you, if meditation-based, if therapy-based, like there's a million ways to do this. And what I always try to say is, there's recovery advocacy and then there's content creation. And true to the theme of being schooled, I used to consider myself a recovery advocate, but these days I kind of just consider myself a storyteller who's in recovery trying to say what worked for me. And I'm not a drug counselor. I'm not a licensed clinician. I'm just a person who's grateful to be alive and sober. And I like to surround myself with other people who are grateful to be alive and sober too. And they don't have to be on my path. But like you say, block out negativity. Sometimes in early recovery, negativity can seem like it's impossible to block out. So when I'm trying to preach like, oh, happiness, like stability, all these things to a dude that's in post-acute withdrawal, having stomach issues 3 weeks out of detox because he's got like underlying medical conditions and his gut biome's thrown off and all these jobs are throwing rejections in his face and his sober house manager's mad that he didn't clean the refrigerator right, that gratitude isn't going to seem tenable. And when I was in that place in early recovery, even after the detox, I had all this anxiety, all this fear, all this pain because I hadn't done the shadow work or the spiritual work yet. But I had to understand at that point that even though I had all that darkness and that anxiety, some of which I still have today when I'm not working the right program, that's okay. A craving does not automatically mean a relapse. That same insatiable, you've been through opioid detox, that like feeling of simultaneously being restless, but also so tired you can't get out of bed, little pins and needles in your skin, simultaneous sweats and chills, like that discomfort is a boundless source of motivation. And even when it goes away from the physical stuff, just into the emotional and spiritual stuff, I was like, I'm going to feel like this forever. And it feels like that in the moment. And nobody, regardless of their serenity, can tell you otherwise and have you believe that on like a neurophysiological level because your brain, your spirit is crying out to go back to the same destruction. But what I tell people is that's not going to magically go away. For some people, it does through prayer, through meditation, through diet, through fasting. That's great. But it's not going to be everybody. And I was one of the people that it didn't magically happen for. But when I flipped the script and I was like, wait a minute, when I was dope sick, I was throwing up in the alley, but I still walked 5 miles to get my bag. So I'm feeling bad, but not that bad. I'm over the critical detox. Shoot, you're telling me I can't walk to another job after it rejects me? You're telling me that I can't have this hard conversation with my loved one? You're telling me that I can't do the spiritual work that is going to make it maybe possible for it to be a little less painful? So instead of saying, oh my gosh, these cravings are so bad, call it victim mentality or just call it pessimism, I was like, it's pretty cool that I have these cravings and this anxiety because this can be the fuel to get me to a better place before I actualize the spiritual development that I see in all these people I look up to. So I would just say to people, listen, we all want to not have cravings and we all want to be like happy and joyous and spiritually free. And that's all great, but don't be afraid to utilize those same cravings and anxiety as the fuel to push you forward because it's not going to magically go away until you do the work. But while you're in the process of doing that work, don't hate yourself for it. Don't think you're a bad person because you have cravings or anxiety. This is part of the process, and it's something you can use to your advantage.
Exactly. Beautiful. Beautifully said. And it is a process. Time takes time.
Amen.
But as long as you hang on, just for the day, that's why I'm such an advocate for just for the day, you can get through anything. I used to say I can hang by my toes just for one day. If you tell me I'm going to hang forever, I'm going to let go because I've got no faith in forever. But just for the day, I got faith. Just for the day, I've got courage. Just for the day, I've got belief. I have belief and belief in myself. And that comes after time. Because in the early days, I didn't have belief in me. I had belief in you. If you could get clean, why can't I? You were fucked up. You were bad, mother. You're shooting this shit up on the street, And when I tell my story about drawing water out of a toilet bowl in a police station because I'm dope sick and I've got to get high, and I'm trying to push something into my vein that I don't even know what it is because I've got it off some guy who I don't even know. You talk about insanity. That's insane. That's insane. And I got through that. So if I can get through that, I can get through anything. I say it all the time. When I got diagnosed with cancer, I said, it won't kill me. And the doctors looked at me and they're like, what? I said, heroin couldn't kill me. The police couldn't kill me. The gangsters couldn't kill me. This arsehole cancer, it's not going to kill me. And he started laughing, he said, I wish everyone had your attitude. I said, I wish everyone had my program. And he didn't quite get it, but they get it because I don't hide the fact that I'm a recovering addict, And that I'm one shot away from being a junkie, one drink away from being a drunk. No matter how long I've been clean, there's no big shots. And, the big shots are one shot away from being a junkie, I'm a recovering addict. I'm humbled to be part of this incredible journey. I get to share it with beautiful people all around the world. I really love what you've been doing. Where can people find your music and follow your journey and listen to your radio show, brother?
If you Google Benjamin Lerner, it'll all pop up. Just look for the guy with the Timu Jay and Silent Bob hair and the beanies in the summertime. And it's Benjamin Lerner is my primary platform on Facebook. It's Benjamin Lerner Recovery on TikTok, Benjamin.Lerner on Instagram. My music platforms are Benjamin Lerner on Spotify and Benjamin Lerner on YouTube. And more than just me, I mean, you do an incredible service, not just with your frontline work as a coach and someone helping guys work your program with you. You're doing a great service with your podcast. And what I would say to anybody who's like, who the heck does this guy think he is? He's just like this suburban, like surf boy. Like, I'm not vibing with his whole like hippie Christian thing. I would say that's okay. I would sooner have you be like, yeah, I like some of it, but pass, and go look at Danny Shannon, or if you're Cali sober, Quinn Lapierre, or if you're a harm reduction person like Janine, or like any of those people, like even people who I've had disagreements with in the past because we're on different paths and just trying to figure it out. Like Jimmy McGill makes great content for faith stuff. There's a lot of people in every scene that have so much wisdom. So more than just check my stuff out, and thank you for the shameless plug. I'm kind of ruining it with this whole spiel, but check out the recovery community. Because if you, for whatever reason, if you're like in the rooms and you can't get to like a group, or if you're in therapy and your therapist cancels, or if you're a faith-based thing and you're not able to make it to church, like open your phone and for free. The plug was never free. The bar was never free. You can drum up content that feeds your purpose for no money at all. Just the cost of charging your phone, opening it up, typing in recovery content, and the same way we used to look for the right plug with the right price for the right work and active use, you will find a community. It's not going to be perfect, but you will find a community that will welcome you and people who want to help you. So the same way we kept an open mind in active addiction, like you with the bag in the police station, not knowing where it came from, we get to keep an open mind and learn from each other in recovery. So God bless you and your mission, man. I really appreciate you doing what you do and saving people's lives.
God bless you, brother. I believe, we just plant seeds.
Amen.
I don't take credit for anybody's recovery, because I learned in early recovery that when I took credit for their recovery, I had to take responsibility for their relapse.
Yeah.
And I wasn't prepared to do that. And I say to people, family, they go to me, oh, you saved my son's life. I said, no, he saved his own life. I showed him where to dig and I gave him the tools, but he had to pick up the shovel, man. Don't go putting that responsibility on me. There's only one loving God, as he may express himself. And I believe that, through my own belief system, that as long as the God's not me, it doesn't matter what God it is. As long as you're finding freedom, it doesn't matter what you're using. And as long as you're not harming yourself and others, you're doing a fantastic job, But I really look forward to future conversations. I love talking to you. I love your stuff. I've been watching you grow a beautiful family, 3 beautiful boys. Your wife, I know she's your rock. My wife's my rock. We got a new cat the other day, a Mancoon. That's the really big ones, We got a little baby and we called it Blessing. That's her name, Blessing, because we are blessed. We're blessed as families. We're blessed as human beings. We're blessed as a community. You're part of my community,
Likewise, man.
I always watch your content. I always listen to what you're doing. I always like what you're saying, because you're genuine, you're authentic, and you're real. And that's what we're lacking in society. We're lacking authenticity.
Well, that's you, bro. You're the OG of that.
Yeah. We're lacking authenticity. And that's sad, because, people are walking around with fake Rolexes, with fake diamonds and fake chains, with the fake life, getting photos out of somebody else in front of somebody else's Lamborghini, looking for likes of people they don't even know. Come on, man.
Yeah. What I always say to those people is, people say, oh, you're only in this for the likes and clicks. I'm like, dude, I'm a speaker. I'm a writer. I'm a musician. Of course I like it when people validate me, but that's not going to keep me sober. Yeah. I've had days where I've had reels get 300,000 likes, 10 million views, and I feel emptier than when my algorithmic engagement is really low. What I tell people is the social engagement that we should be focusing on our best days doesn't happen inside the phone. It happens in our families and our communities and everything else. And I can talk a big game, follower this, like view count that. At the end of the day, if separate from being sober, I'm not happy and I'm not spiritually fulfilled, then those numbers mean nothing. And so what I say to all creators is, run your numbers up, start a motivational channel, do coaching, make money, provide for your family, look good on the internet. But when the phone's off, the camera's off, and your Wi-Fi's off, what's there? And if the answer is less than when your phone's on, maybe it's time to do a little work. And that's what I have to tell myself every day.
Yeah, 100%. I think I spoke to you last time. Before I got arrested, I was 16 years clean. I was laying in a waterfront mansion with my race car, my sports car, and another car in the garage, my boat on the back because it was a waterfront, my boat on the back with 2 jet skis, laying in bed, hoping I didn't wake up tomorrow morning at 16 years clean.
Something, man.
Spiritually
Wow.
bankrupt. Spiritually bankrupt. And I have friends, I say to them, I said it to Charlie Sheen when I met Charlie in 1994. I said to him, I said, you're so poor that all you have is money. And he's like, what do you want me to go to one of them AA meetings or something, motherfucker? You know, we was joking. We was having a banter. And I'll reach out to this one. I just had a really good friend of mine, the guy that I met Charlie Sheen through, Greg James, incredible tattooist, Sunset Strip Tattoo in LA. That's where I met Charlie, and I met a lot of people from the States. He passed away last week from this disease. You know, he drank himself to death. And this guy was one of the most creative, brilliant tattoo artists in the world, renowned, most famous, and he died living in his son's backyard in a little granny flat, penniless. It's so sad. That's why I advocate this recovery. That's why I hate this disease. That's why I'm so passionate, because it makes beautiful families into no family, beautiful people into nobodies. And it's really, really sad because we are somebody and we all deserve to find this recovery. And I love recovering out loud so people don't have to suffer in silence, you know. Benjamin Lerner, a gentleman and a scholar, and I appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate you too, man. Big love from across the pond, man. And thank you for everything and everything you do. And let's keep it going one day at a time, baby.
100%.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.